Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
I'm Donald, 34 years old, a software engineer from Boston, and the middle child in a family of 7 siblings. Our annual family retreat has been tradition for 15 years, something I looked forward to despite always feeling like the forgotten middle child. When my mother called to tell me there wouldn't be enough space for me this year, I felt that familiar sting of rejection. But this time, instead of accepting it, I decided to handle things differently. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe to join my journey of standing up for myself after years of being overlooked. To understand why that phone call hit me so hard, you need to know about my family. I'm smack in the middle of 7 children, with 3 older and 3 younger siblings, which often meant getting lost in the shuffle growing up. My oldest brother James is 42, a corporate lawyer with all the trimmings of success. He married Jennifer, who my parents adore, and they have 3 children who can do no wrong in my parents' eyes. James was always the golden child, the one who set the bar impossibly high for the rest of us with his perfect grades and athletic achievements. Every family gathering inevitably includes a toast to his latest courtroom victory or partnership promotion. Then there's Michael, 40, who followed our father's not-so-subtle guidance into becoming a doctor. He and his wife Sarah have twin daughters who are the spitting image of my mother, something she mentions at every opportunity. Michael always remembers to call our parents twice a week and sends them on cruises for their anniversaries, earning him the title of most thoughtful son year after year. Rebecca, 37, is our eldest sister and the marketing executive who seems to have it all figured out. She married Thomas, an investment banker, and they have one son who's already being groomed for an Ivy League future. Rebecca hosts Thanksgiving each year, and her home looks like it belongs in a magazine. My mother constantly refers to her as the daughter who knows how to create a beautiful home. After Rebecca comes me, Donald, 34 and single. I'm a software engineer at a tech company in Boston. It's a good job that I enjoy and that pays well, but in my family's eyes, it's never been quite impressive enough. I don't have the spouse, the children, or the suburban home that seems to be the admission ticket to full family acceptance. At gatherings, after asking about my siblings' accomplishments, the conversation around me usually devolves into questions about when I'll settle down or suggestions about women I should meet. Following me is Amy, 31, the elementary school teacher with a heart of gold. She married Daniel, her college sweetheart, and they have 2 adorable daughters. Amy is the peacemaker, always trying to make sure everyone feels included, though even her efforts often skip over me. She's my mother's go-to for family disputes and emotional support. Jessica, 28, is our fashion-forward sister making waves in New York's design scene. Currently engaged to Robert, a finance guy, their wedding planning dominates family conversations. Jessica always had a flair for the dramatic, and our parents indulge her artistic temperament in ways they never did with my more practical interests in coding and technology. Finally, there's Brian, 26, the baby of the family and a graduate student in psychology. He's dating Laura, whom everyone already treats like family. Brian gets away with things none of the rest of us ever could, from gap years exploring Europe to changing his major 3 times before finding his passion. Our parents are funding his graduate studies completely, something they deemed unnecessary for my computer science degree. As for our parents, my father Richard is 68. A retired business executive who still consults occasionally to keep sharp. My mother Patricia, 66, transitioned from homemaker to community volunteer extraordinaire once we all left home. They've been married for 45 years and make sure everyone knows they consider their family their greatest achievement. The family dynamics were established early. James, Michael, and Rebecca formed the upper tier of siblings, with Amy, Jessica, and Brian making up the younger crew. I existed somewhere in between, never quite fitting into either group. When teams were chosen for family games, I was the afterthought. When stories were told about childhood memories, mine were often mixed up or forgotten entirely. This pattern continued into our adult lives, particularly at our annual family retreats, which started when James's first child was born. What began as a weekend getaway grew into a week-long event as our family expanded. These retreats were held at various vacation spots, usually featuring outdoor activities, group meals, and endless photo opportunities. Last year's retreat at a beach house in North Carolina showcased our typical family dynamic perfectly. When rooms were assigned, I ended up on a pull-out couch while distant cousins got proper bedrooms. During the family talent show, I was assigned to film rather than participate. And in the massive family photo that now hangs in my parents' living room, I'm barely visible in the back row, half my face obscured by my uncle's shoulder. Despite these patterns, I continued trying to be part of the family circle. I never missed sending birthday gifts to my nieces and nephews. I called my parents weekly. I showed up to every family function with a smile, bringing thoughtful gifts and offering to help in the kitchen. I listened to my siblings' problems and celebrated their successes, even when my own achievements went unacknowledged. Each year, I hoped the family retreat would be different. Each year, I returned home feeling more like an outsider than before, but I kept trying because they were my family, and I held on to the belief that things could change. That persistent hope made my mother's recent phone call all the more devastating. This year's retreat was planned for Lake Tahoe, a location I'd been suggesting for years because of its perfect balance of outdoor activities and relaxation options. When I heard we were finally going there, I felt a surge of excitement that maybe this year would be different. Maybe my input had finally been valued. I started planning early, researching hiking trails that would be appropriate for the various age groups in our family, and making a list of restaurants that could accommodate our large group. I even took time off work well in advance, blocking 2 full weeks to include travel days and some buffer time to really connect with everyone. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday evening when my mother's name flashed on my phone screen. I answered with my usual enthusiasm, asking about her garden club and my father's golf game before she could even get to the reason for her call. "Donald, dear," she said, using that tone that immediately put me on alert, "I'm calling about the family retreat next month." "I've been looking forward to it," I replied. "I already have some ideas for activities that everyone might enjoy." A pause. Then, "Well, that's what I'm calling about. We've had to make some adjustments to the accommodations this year." Another pause. Longer this time. I waited, already feeling a knot forming in my stomach. "The thing is, with everyone bringing their families, and your father inviting some of his old colleagues, and your brother James bringing his in-laws, we just don't have enough space for everyone." The implication hung in the air before she continued. "So, we thought maybe this year you could sit this one out. Just this once. You understand, don't you, dear? There just isn't enough space." I gripped my phone tighter, trying to process what she was saying. "Not enough space? How many properties did you rent?" "3 houses," she answered. "But they're not as large as we initially thought, and with all the children needing their own beds." "I could get my own place nearby," I suggested quickly. "There must be hotels or other rentals in the area." "Oh, everything's booked solid this time of year," she said dismissively. "Besides, it would be complicated with the meal planning and activities if you're staying separately." Before I could respond, she shifted topics abruptly. "Did I tell you Jessica's fiancé is bringing his parents to meet everyone? And Michael's twins just made the regional swim team. They grow up so fast." The conversation continued with my mother chattering about family news while I sat there, stunned by the casual exclusion. When we finally hung up, I stared at my phone for a long time, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Initially, I felt the familiar hurt wash over me. The same feeling I'd had countless times growing up when I was the sibling left out. But this time something felt different. I wasn't a child anymore, waiting for scraps of attention. I was an adult who deserved basic respect and inclusion in my own family. 3 days later, as I was still processing this rejection, my phone buzzed with a notification. My youngest brother Brian had posted photos in our family group chat. "Tahoe house is booked. Can't wait for the epic reunion." The images showed 3 massive lakefront properties side by side, each one easily 5,000 square feet. The caption mentioned room for everyone with laughing emojis. I zoomed in on the photos, counting bedrooms, doing mental math. I texted Brian privately, "Those houses look huge. How many people are actually coming?" His response came quickly. "Let me check the spreadsheet." 124. Confirmed. Dad went all out this year. Even invited his college roommates and their families. 124 people. And somehow, in all that space, there wasn't room for one more. For me, over the next few days, I pieced together more information through social media and casual conversations with my more talkative siblings. The guest list included all 6 of my siblings and their significant others, all 12 of my nieces and nephews, both sets of in-laws from James and Michael's marriages, my father's 3 former business partners and their families, my mother's sister and her entire family, including second cousins I'd met maybe twice, Jessica's fiancé's extended family, apparently getting a preview of their future relatives, several family friends who weren't even related to us, 4 former exchange students who had lived with us decades ago. The list went on, each addition making it clearer that this wasn't about space, this was about priorities, and I wasn't one of them. My initial instinct was to call my mother out, to demand an explanation, to make a scene that would force them to acknowledge what they were doing. I drafted angry texts. I rehearsed confrontational speeches. I imagined dramatic scenarios where I showed up unannounced and exposed their lies. But something stopped me. A lifetime of these confrontations had taught me they led nowhere. My feelings would be minimized, my reactions labeled as oversensitive, and ultimately nothing would change. No, this time needed to be different. This time, instead of pleading for inclusion or sulking in exclusion, I would take action. An idea began to form in my mind, one that made me smile for the first time since that phone call. As a software engineer, I'm trained to solve problems. When faced with a challenge, I break it down into manageable components and develop a solution. So that's exactly what I did with my family retreat situation. The problem. My family claimed there wasn't enough space for me at Lake Tahoe. The objective, find a way to attend the retreat on my own terms. The constraints. 124 people were already accommodated in 3 large houses. My first thoughts were admittedly a bit ridiculous. I briefly considered renting an RV and parking it in the driveway of my parents' rental. I imagined setting up a tent on the beach and waving to my family as they walked by. For one crazy moment, I even thought about buying a small boat and living on the lake during the retreat, showing up to family activities soaking wet. But as amusing as these scenarios were, they didn't solve the real issue. I needed to make a point, not just physically be there. I decided to start by researching the property my family had rented. A few strategic searches and some social media sleuthing revealed they were staying at Lakefront Luxury Estates, one of the most exclusive rental communities in Lake Tahoe. The 3 houses they'd rented were part of a larger resort property that included a main lodge, individual cabins, and various amenities. This information sparked an idea. What if I could stay at the same resort, but in accommodations that would make their rental houses look modest by comparison? I had a friend, Alex, who worked in luxury property management. While he didn't manage this specific property, he had connections in the industry. I gave him a call, trying to sound casual as I explained my situation. So basically, your family said there's no room for you, and you want to show up in style to prove them wrong? Alex summarized after I finished my explanation. Something like that, I admitted. Is it too petty? Petty? Maybe. Deserved? Absolutely, Alex laughed. Let me make some calls. 2 hours later, Alex called back with news that seemed too good to be true. You're not going to believe this, he began, excitement evident in his voice. The presidential suite in the main lodge is available during your family's retreat dates. It's usually booked a year in advance, but there was a last-minute cancellation from some tech billionaire who had to reschedule. The presidential suite? I repeated, trying to picture what that might entail. Donald, this isn't just any suite. It's 8,000 square feet of pure luxury. 5 bedrooms, though you only need 1. A private infinity pool overlooking the lake. A home theater system. A full gourmet kitchen with the option to hire a private chef. Floor-to-ceiling windows with panoramic views. And the best part? It's positioned on the hillside above the rental houses, with a clear view down to where your family will be staying. My mind raced with possibilities. How much are we talking about? When Alex quoted the price, I nearly dropped my phone. It was astronomical, more than 4 times what I typically spent on an entire year's worth of vacations. But then I thought about 15 years of family retreats where I felt invisible. I thought about the casual dismissal in my mother's voice when she told me there wasn't enough space. I thought about 124 people who made the cut while I didn't. I'll take it, I said, surprising even myself with my decisiveness. "Are you sure? It's a lot of money," Alex cautioned. "I'm sure. I've been saving for years, and my company just gave me a substantial bonus for a project I completed. If there's ever a time to splurge, this is it." With that decision made, the plan expanded rapidly. If I was going to do this, I would go all out. I arranged for a private chef for the week, booking a highly recommended local chef who specialized in farm-to-table cuisine. I reserved a daily housekeeping service, a personal concierge, and even a massage therapist who would come to the suite twice during my stay. I coordinated with the property management to ensure my reservation remained confidential. The last thing I wanted was for my family to find out before I was ready for the reveal. The staff was surprisingly understanding when I explained the situation, perhaps because they'd seen their fair share of family drama play out in their luxury accommodations. To prepare for working remotely during the retreat, I arranged for enhanced Wi-Fi and a dedicated workspace in one of the suite's studies. I might be making a point, but I still had responsibilities to my team back in Boston. As the retreat dates approached, I found myself experiencing a mix of emotions. There was excitement about executing my plan, satisfaction at the thought of my family's reaction, but also a lingering sadness that it had come to this. Part of me still hoped that this grand gesture might lead to a genuine conversation about how I'd been made to feel over the years. I packed carefully, including not only clothes appropriate for various retreat activities, but also small personal items to make the enormous suite feel like my space. Family photos, yes, even of the people who had excluded me, my favorite books, and the hand-knit throw blanket my grandmother had made for me before she passed away. As I finalized the arrangements, I decided on one more important detail. I would arrive a full day before my family. This would give me time to settle in, prepare my space, and be ready to accidentally cross paths with them from a position of complete comfort and confidence. The drive to Lake Tahoe was therapeutic. 6 hours on the road gave me plenty of time to think, rehearse what I might say when I inevitably encountered my family, and appreciate the increasingly beautiful scenery. The mountains appeared on the horizon long before I reached them, growing more impressive as I approached. By the time I was winding through the pine-covered hills leading to the lake, my anxieties had mellowed into determination. I arrived at Lakefront Luxury Estates shortly after noon, a full day before my family was scheduled to check in. The main lodge was an impressive structure of stone and timber, designed to blend with the natural surroundings while still screaming exclusivity. As I pulled up to the private entrance, a valet immediately approached. "Welcome to Lakefront Luxury Estates, sir. Do you have a reservation with us?" "Yes, the presidential suite," I replied, still feeling slightly surreal saying those words. The valet's demeanor shifted subtly, becoming even more attentive. "Of course, sir. We've been expecting you. I'll take care of your car while Marcus assists you with check-in." As if on cue, a man in an impeccable suit approached, extending his hand. "Mr. Donald? I'm Marcus, the property manager. It's a pleasure to welcome you to our presidential suite. We have everything prepared according to your specifications." Marcus personally escorted me through the lobby, which featured soaring ceilings, a massive stone fireplace, and windows framing perfect views of the lake. Rather than stopping at the front desk, he led me to a private elevator that would take us directly to the suite. "Your friend Alex explained the situation," Marcus said discreetly as the elevator ascended. "We've ensured your reservation doesn't appear on any public listings, and our staff has been instructed to maintain your privacy until you indicate otherwise." I appreciated his understanding. "Thank you. I'm not trying to cause drama, just standing your ground," Marcus finished with a knowing smile. "We've seen all kinds of family dynamics play out here. Your approach is actually quite restrained compared to some." The elevator doors opened directly into the suite, and I momentarily forgot how to breathe. Impressive didn't begin to cover it. The entryway led to a great room, with ceilings that must have been 20 feet high, and windows that seemed to bring the lake right into the room. The furnishings were a perfect balance of luxury and comfort, with natural materials and a color palette that echoed the blues of the lake and the greens of the surrounding forest. "This is the main living area," Marcus explained unnecessarily as he began the tour. "Through here is the dining room, which seats 20 if you decide to entertain. The gourmet kitchen is fully stocked according to your preferences, and Chef Anthony will arrive at 6 this evening to discuss your meal preferences for the week. We continued through the 5 bedrooms, each with its own theme and ensuite bathroom featuring heated floors, soaking tubs, and rainfall showers. The master bedroom had a private balcony overlooking the lake, positioned perfectly to also view the 3 houses my family would be occupying below. "Those are the cedar, pine, and aspen houses," Marcus pointed out, following my gaze. "Part of our luxury collection, though not quite as comprehensive as your accommodations." The tour continued through a home theater, with reclining leather seats and a projection system, a game room with a billiards table and classic arcade machines, a fully equipped home gym, and finally, the piece de résistance, a private infinity pool and hot tub on the terrace, positioned to create the illusion that you could swim right into Lake Tahoe. "The pool is heated to your specified temperature," Marcus noted, "and this button calls for poolside service should you require anything while enjoying the water." After the tour, Marcus introduced me to Maria, my personal concierge for the week, who would be available via a dedicated phone line for any requests. He then discreetly withdrew, leaving me to take in my surroundings. I stood alone in the massive suite, listening to the silence broken only by the faint sound of water from the infinity pool outside. The contrast between this space and the pull-out couch I'd been assigned last year couldn't have been more stark. For a moment, I wondered if I'd gone too far, if this grand gesture would create a rift rather than open a conversation. But then I remembered my mother's dismissive tone. There just isn't enough space. I looked around at the 8,000 square feet of luxury surrounding me and felt a surge of righteous satisfaction. I spent the afternoon settling in, unpacking my clothes into the master bedroom's walk-in closet that was larger than my first apartment. I arranged my personal items thoughtfully, placing family photos on side tables, setting up my laptop in the study, and draping my grandmother's blanket over one of the living room sofas. At 4, I had a meeting with the housekeeping staff to discuss my preferences. At 5, the concierge returned to confirm the week's arrangements, including the excursions and activities I'd booked for myself. And at 6, Chef Anthony arrived to plan the menu, suggesting local specialties and asking detailed questions about my preferences. "Will you be dining alone, sir, or should I prepare for guests?" he asked. "Let's plan for both scenarios," I replied. "I'm here for a family reunion of sorts, but the details are still evolving." Chef Anthony nodded understandingly. "I'll create flexible menus that can be scaled up if needed, and I'll prepare a special welcome breakfast for tomorrow morning." After he left, I walked out onto the main terrace, glass of wine in hand, and looked down at the 3 houses where my family would be staying. From this vantage point, I could see staff preparing the houses, delivering welcome baskets, and turning on lights as evening approached. I checked the time. According to the itinerary I'd gleaned from Brian's messages, my family would begin arriving around 10 tomorrow morning. My father always insisted on getting an early start for travel days. As darkness fell, I realized I was both exhausted and wired with anticipation. After a light dinner prepared by Chef Anthony before he left for the evening, I decided to take advantage of the massive soaking tub in the master bathroom. As I relaxed in the hot water, looking out through the bathroom's picture window at the moonlight reflecting off Lake Tahoe, I rehearsed what I would say when I inevitably ran into my family. I wouldn't be angry or accusatory. I wouldn't demand explanations or apologies. I would simply be present, calm, and unapologetic about taking care of myself when they had failed to include me. I slept surprisingly well in the ridiculously comfortable king-sized bed, waking to sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Chef Anthony arrived early, preparing a breakfast of locally sourced ingredients while I enjoyed coffee on the terrace, watching the activity below as staff made final preparations for my family's arrival. At precisely 9:45, I spotted the first familiar vehicle turning into the resort entrance, my father's SUV, always the first to arrive at any family function. Game time. I watched from my terrace as my family's caravan of vehicles wound up the resort driveway. First came my father's black SUV, followed closely by James's luxury sedan. One by one, the vehicles parked in front of the 3 houses, and family members spilled out, greeting each other with hugs and excited chatter that carried faintly up to my perch. My parents emerged from their vehicle, my father immediately taking charge, directing people where to park and unload. My mother stood in the center of it all, arms spread wide to receive hugs from grandchildren running toward her. The scene looked like something from a family reunion movie, everyone playing their perfect parts. I decided not to make my presence known immediately. Instead, I enjoyed a leisurely breakfast prepared by Chef Anthony while watching the chaos of check-in unfold below. Children ran between the houses, exploring their new surroundings. Adults carried luggage and coolers, following my father's directions about room assignments. Around noon, when most of the family had arrived and begun settling in, I decided it was time for my first strategic appearance. I changed into casual but obviously high-end resort wear and made my way down to the main property path that connected all the residences. I timed my casual stroll perfectly, passing by just as Amy was helping her daughters set up a lemonade stand in front of their rental house. She was so focused on arranging paper cups that she didn't notice me at first. "That looks refreshing," I said, stopping a few feet away. Amy's head snapped up, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Donald? What are you? How are you? What?" Her daughters, sensing something interesting happening, stopped arranging lemons and stared at me. "Uncle Donald," the older one exclaimed, running to hug me around the waist. "Mom said you couldn't come." Amy's face flushed red. "Lily, why don't you and your sister go inside and get more sugar for the lemonade?" After the girls reluctantly went inside, Amy crossed her arms. "What are you doing here? Mom said you couldn't make it this year." "That's not exactly what she told me," I replied calmly, "but I managed to find accommodations after all." "Where are you staying?" Everything nearby was booked solid. That's why we had to be so strict with room assignments. I gestured vaguely toward the main lodge. "I found a place up there. Nothing fancy, but it works." Before Amy could ask more questions, her husband Daniel emerged from the house, followed by my sister Jessica and her fiancé. "Donald?" Jessica exclaimed. "What a surprise! We thought you weren't joining us this year." I repeated my vague explanation about finding last-minute accommodations, watching as confusion spread across their faces. "Does Mom know you're here?" Jessica asked, voicing the question clearly on everyone's mind. "Not yet," I admitted. "I thought I'd surprise everyone." Jessica and Amy exchanged glances, a silent communication that excluded me as usual. "Well, you should probably go tell her now," Amy suggested. "She and Dad are at the middle house with James and Jennifer." I nodded, knowing this confrontation was inevitable. "I'll head over there now. Good to see you all." As I walked toward the middle house, I could hear Amy and Jessica whispering urgently behind me. By the time I reached my destination, I suspected the news of my arrival was already spreading through family text chains and hushed phone calls. The door to the middle house was propped open, allowing the cool lake breeze to flow through the space. I knocked anyway, watching as my mother's form appeared from the kitchen area, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Coming!" she called cheerfully before looking up and freezing mid-step. The dish towel dropped from her suddenly limp fingers. "Hello, Mom," I said pleasantly. "Beautiful location, isn't it?" "Donald," she whispered, as though seeing a ghost. "What are you doing here?" "I'm joining the family retreat," I replied simply. "Just as I do every year." My father appeared behind her, his expression shifting quickly from confusion to discomfort to forced joviality. "Donald, what a surprise. We didn't think you could make it." "You said there wasn't enough space," my mother added, finding her voice. "We had to be so careful with the room assignments." "That's what I was told," I agreed. "But fortunately, I was able to find my own accommodations." "Where?" "Everything around here is booked solid this time of year." My mother's eyes narrowed slightly, the same expression she'd worn when questioning us as children about broken rules. "I'm staying at the main lodge," I said, deliberately vague. "The main lodge? But those rooms are tiny," my father interjected, "and outrageously expensive for what you get." I smiled. "I managed to find something suitable. Actually, I'd love for you all to see it. Why don't you come up for coffee tomorrow morning? Say around 9? I can show you my space, and we can catch up properly." My mother seemed about to protest, but my father placed a hand on her shoulder. "That sounds fine, son. We'll be there." "Wonderful. Room PS, in the main building." I turned to leave, then added, "Feel free to spread the word to everyone else. There's plenty of space." I could feel their stares boring into my back as I walked away, heading back up the path toward the main lodge. By dinner time, I knew the news of my arrival would have reached every one of the 124 guests. My phone remained silent, though. No calls or texts from family members asking for explanations. I enjoyed a gourmet dinner on my private terrace, watching the lights come on in the houses below as evening fell. Through the telescoping lens, the suite provided for enjoying wildlife views, or in my case, family watching. I could see groups gathering for dinner, animated conversations taking place, likely about my unexpected appearance. The next morning I woke early, both anxious and excited for the coming confrontation. Chef Anthony outdid himself preparing a breakfast spread worthy of a magazine photo shoot. Fresh pastries, fruit platters, a selection of gourmet breakfast dishes kept warm on the dining table's embedded heating elements, and a coffee and tea station that would put most cafes to shame. At precisely 9 o'clock, the private elevator announced an arrival. I stood in the center of the great room, bracing myself as the doors opened to reveal my parents, looking uncomfortable and out of place despite their normally confident demeanors. "Welcome," I said, gesturing them inside. "Come in and make yourselves comfortable." They stepped into the suite, their eyes widening as they took in the expansive space, the soaring ceilings, the panoramic views, and the obvious luxury surrounding us. "This is where you're staying?" my mother asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, the presidential suite," I confirmed. It was available at the last minute. Lucky timing. My father walked to the windows, looking out at the view that encompassed not just the lake, but also a perfect aerial view of their 3 rental houses below. "Donald," he began, turning back to me with a furrowed brow, "this suite must cost." "A fortune?" I finished for him. "Yes, it does. But since I wasn't expected to contribute to the family houses, I decided to invest in my own comfort this year." My mother was still standing near the elevator, seemingly unable to process what she was seeing. "But you said you found accommodations." "We thought maybe a small room. Or, I found exactly what I needed," I replied calmly. "Coffee? Chef Anthony has prepared quite a spread." "Chef Anthony?" my mother repeated faintly. Before I could respond, the elevator announced another arrival. The doors opened to reveal James, Michael, and Rebecca, the upper-tier siblings who had always formed a united front. "Mom texted us to come up," James explained, then stopped abruptly as he took in the suite. "Holy language," my mother corrected automatically, though her heart clearly wasn't in it. My 3 older siblings stepped into the suite, their expressions a mix of shock and something that looked suspiciously like envy. "Donald," Rebecca said slowly, "how can you possibly afford this place?" And there it was, the question that revealed so much about how my family saw me, less successful, less established, less worthy of taking up space at their precious retreat. "I'm a senior software engineer at a major tech company," I replied evenly. "I've been there 8 years, received multiple promotions, and just got a substantial bonus for leading a project that increased company revenue by 30% last quarter. How do you think I afford it?" The uncomfortable silence that followed was broken by the arrival of Amy, Jessica, and Brian, along with various spouses and a few curious nieces and nephews who had clearly begged to come along. "Uncle Donald lives in a castle," my niece Lily announced loudly, running past the adults to explore the vast space. Other children followed her lead, exclamations of awe echoing through the suite as they discovered the game room and theater. "Please, everyone help yourselves to breakfast," I said, gesturing to the dining table where Chef Anthony was quietly adding fresh items to replace those that had cooled. As my family awkwardly gathered around the table, filling plates with food they were too stunned to properly appreciate, I maintained my calm demeanor, answering questions about the suite's amenities as though this level of luxury was perfectly normal for me. My mother remained silent, her face growing increasingly flushed. I could see her processing not just the opulence surrounding us, but the implications of what I had done. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled with a mix of embarrassment and anger. "How could you do this, Donald?" she demanded, loud enough to silence all other conversations. "How could you embarrass us this way?" And there it was. Not "I'm sorry we excluded you," or "there was clearly a misunderstanding," but "how could you embarrass us?" "Embarrass you?" I repeated, keeping my voice level despite the anger flaring inside me. "I'm simply attending the family retreat, as I have for 15 years. When told there wasn't space for me among 124 people in 3 massive houses, I found my own accommodations. How exactly is that embarrassing to you? You know exactly what you're doing," she continued, her voice rising. "Showing up like this, in this excessive display. making us look like we can't provide for our own son. The room fell completely silent. Even the children stopped their explorations, sensing the tension. Is that what this is about, Mom? Appearances? Because it seems to me that if you were concerned about providing for your son, you might have found space for him among the 124 people you did include. My mother's face crumpled, and she turned to my father for support. He placed an arm around her shoulders but looked uncomfortable, clearly recognizing they were in the wrong but unwilling to say so. The confrontation I had anticipated for days was finally happening, but I felt oddly detached from it. Watching my mother's reaction, I realized this was about much more than one family retreat. It was about years of feeling invisible, of being the afterthought, of being deemed less important than distant relatives and family friends. As my mother continued to quietly cry into my father's shoulder, my siblings exchanged awkward glances, no one quite sure what to do next. The beautiful breakfast spread sat largely untouched, the breathtaking views ignored in the face of family drama unfolding. In the silence, my 8-year-old nephew Max spoke up from where he'd been examining the telescope on the terrace. Is Uncle Donald in trouble because Grandma said there wasn't room for him but there really was? And just like that, the tension shifted, my mother's tears halted, and all adult eyes turned to Max. "What did you say, sweetheart?" Rebecca asked her son carefully. Max looked suddenly nervous at being the center of attention. "I heard Grandma tell you on the phone that Uncle Donald might make things awkward because he doesn't have a wife to bring like everyone else does. She said it was easier to just tell him there wasn't enough space." The silence that followed was deafening. Max's innocent revelation hung in the air, casting an uncomfortable spotlight on the real reason for my exclusion. I watched as my mother's expression shifted from embarrassment to mortification, while my siblings avoided eye contact with me or each other. "Max, honey," Rebecca finally said, "grown-up conversations are private. Why don't you join the other kids in the game room?" But the damage was done. The truth was out, spoken with the unfiltered honesty that only children possess. I took a deep breath, determined not to let anger dictate my response. So it wasn't about space at all, was it? It was about me being single. About me not fitting into the perfect family image you all work so hard to maintain. My mother wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders, attempting to regain her composure. "Donald, you're taking this too personally. We just thought that I'd be uncomfortable? Or that you'd be uncomfortable with me?" I interrupted. "Because I've never felt uncomfortable at family gatherings until you started treating me like I was incomplete without a spouse." An uncomfortable silence followed, broken only by the sound of children playing in the distance, blissfully unaware of the tension among the adults. James cleared his throat. "Look, Donald, no one meant to hurt your feelings. We just thought—" "You just thought what? That I wouldn't notice being excluded? That I wouldn't care? Or that I'd believe the excuse about space despite seeing photos of 3 massive houses?" My voice remained calm, but I could feel years of suppressed feelings rising to the surface. The breakfast Chef Anthony had so carefully prepared sat forgotten as family members shifted uncomfortably under my gaze. Surprisingly, it was Rebecca who spoke next, her voice quiet but clear. "He's right. We've been treating Donald differently for years, and it's not fair." She turned to me. "I'm sorry. This whole situation is ridiculous and hurtful." Her unexpected support momentarily stunned me. Rebecca had always been firmly in the upper tier of siblings, rarely breaking ranks with James and Michael. "It's not just about this retreat," I continued, finding my voice again. "It's about a pattern that's existed our entire lives. The 3 oldest siblings, the 3 youngest, and me somewhere in between, never quite fitting in. Always the afterthought in family photos, family stories, family everything." My words seemed to hit a nerve with Amy, who looked genuinely distressed. "I never realized you felt that way, Donald. I always thought you preferred being independent." "Independent by choice is different from excluded by default," I replied. The conversation might have continued in this vein, painful truths being excavated like artifacts from our shared past, but we were interrupted by the arrival of more family members. The elevator doors opened to reveal several of my nieces and nephews, accompanied by in-laws and family friends who had heard about the mysterious presidential suite and couldn't resist seeing it for themselves. "Wow, Uncle Donald, this place is amazing," my 12-year-old niece Emma exclaimed, rushing in without noticing the tension in the room. "Is that a real infinity pool on the terrace?" The mood shifted as more people arrived, the confrontation temporarily suspended as new arrivals marveled at the suite. Chef Anthony, sensing an opportunity, began offering fresh coffee and replenishing the breakfast spread. "You have your own chef?" Jennifer, James's wife, asked incredulously. "Just for the week," I explained. "Part of the presidential suite package." As people spread throughout the suite, exploring its features and admiring the views, I found myself cornered by my father in the relative privacy of the kitchen. "Donald," he began awkwardly, "I owe you an apology. Your mother had concerns about certain dynamics, but I should have insisted you be included. You're my son, and this retreat is for family." His words were a start, but they fell short of acknowledging the deeper pattern. Still, I recognized the effort it took from my father, never comfortable with emotional conversations, to offer even this much. "Thank you for saying that," I replied, "but this isn't just about one retreat. It's about feeling like I've never quite belonged in this family." My father looked genuinely surprised. "But you're our son. Of course you belong." "Being related and belonging aren't the same thing, Dad. When was the last time you asked about my work, my life? When was the last time any accomplishment of mine was celebrated the way James's promotions or Michael's kids' achievements are?" He didn't have an answer, his silence confirming what I already knew. The realization seemed to hit him hard, his normally confident demeanor faltering. Throughout the morning, family members came and went, the presidential suite becoming an unexpected hub of activity. I noticed my siblings engaging me in conversation more than they had in years, asking questions about my work and life in Boston. Whether driven by genuine interest or guilty consciences, it was a noticeable change. By lunchtime, the initial shock and tension had evolved into something more complex. The children had unanimously declared my suite the cool place and begged to use the pool and game room. Several of my brothers-in-law had discovered the home theater and were planning a movie night. My sisters were admiring the kitchen where Chef Anthony continued to work his magic. My mother remained subdued, occasionally casting glances my way that I couldn't quite interpret. She had always been the architect of family gatherings, controlling every aspect from seating arrangements to activities. My presidential suite had disrupted her carefully constructed hierarchy, and she was clearly struggling to adjust. Around mid-afternoon, as various family members departed to rest before dinner activities, I found myself alone with my oldest brother James. He lingered behind as others left, examining the view from the terrace with unusual hesitation. "You've done well for yourself," he finally said, gesturing around the suite. "I had no idea your career had advanced so much." "That's because no one ever asked," I replied without bitterness, simply stating a fact. James nodded slowly. "Fair enough. We've all been wrapped up in our own lives." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "For what it's worth, I think what Mom did was wrong. Excluding you, based on your marital status it's archaic and unfair." Coming from James, who had always embodied the perfect son role, this admission was significant. "Thank you for saying that," I said. He turned to face me fully. "Rebecca and I were talking earlier. This whole situation has made us realize how the family has split into these factions, I guess. And how you've been caught in the middle all these years. It's not right, and it needs to change." I wasn't sure how much of this newfound awareness would translate into actual change, but it felt like a start. By the time evening arrived, the presidential suite had become an unofficial gathering point, with family members dropping by to use the amenities or simply enjoy the space. My nieces and nephews had spread the word about Uncle Donald's castle, and I found myself hosting impromptu swimming sessions in the infinity pool and gaming tournaments in the theater room. The children's easy acceptance was a stark contrast to the complicated adult dynamics, their only concern being whether I had snacks available, which, thanks to Chef Anthony, I always did. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across Lake Tahoe, I stood on the terrace watching family members move between the houses below. The day had not gone as I had anticipated. Instead of a dramatic confrontation followed by either reconciliation or deeper estrangement, I had experienced something more nuanced. The first cracks appearing in long-established family patterns, small moments of recognition and connection amid the ongoing tension. My youngest brother Brian joined me on the terrace, handing me a beer from the suite's well-stocked refrigerator. "So," he said after a moment. This is either the most epic revenge or the most generous family contribution ever, depending on how you look at it. I laughed despite myself. Brian had always had a knack for cutting through tension. Maybe a bit of both, I admitted. The kids are saying you're the new favorite uncle, he continued. Hard to compete with an infinity pool and arcade games. We stood in companionable silence for a moment before he spoke again, his tone more serious. Mom's struggling with all this. Not just your sweet, but having to face what she did. I think she's realizing how it looks to everyone else, especially after Max blurted out the truth. And how does it look to you? I asked, curious about his perspective as the youngest. Brian considered the question, like she made a really bad call based on outdated ideas about what makes a complete family member. And like the rest of us, let it happen because it was easier than challenging her. His honesty was refreshing. I didn't do this just to make a point, I said, though that was definitely part of it. I did it because I was tired of being treated as less important, less worthy of inclusion. I get it, Brian replied. And for what it's worth, I think it's working. You've definitely got everyone's attention now. As evening fully descended, I noticed my mother sitting alone on the porch of the middle house, looking up toward my suite. Our eyes met briefly across the distance before she looked away. The conversation we needed to have was still coming, but not yet. Some realizations needed time to settle. Some wounds needed air before they could begin to heal. The first full day of the family retreat was ending, and already the dynamics had shifted in ways I couldn't have predicted. My grand gesture had indeed made a statement, but what remained to be seen was whether it would lead to lasting change or merely a temporary disruption in our family's entrenched patterns. The week unfolded in ways I never anticipated when I first booked the presidential suite. What began as a grand gesture of defiance evolved into something more meaningful as the days passed. My suite quickly became the unofficial hub of the family retreat. The initial shock of my accommodations gave way to a new pattern, nieces and nephews arriving each morning to swim in the infinity pool, siblings dropping by for coffee prepared by Chef Anthony, cousins gathering in the home theater for movie nights. By the third day, I had established an open-door policy. Family members were welcome to use the amenities of the suite, with the master bedroom remaining my private space. This generosity wasn't part of my original plan, but I discovered I enjoyed providing this gathering place, seeing family connections form across previously rigid boundaries. The children were the first to fully embrace the new arrangement, moving easily between the rental houses and my suite. They formed new friendships with cousins they'd barely known before, bonding over video games in the theater room or swimming races in the pool. Uncle Donald, my 10-year-old nephew Jack, said to me on the fourth day, "How come you never brought your cool stuff to the retreat before?" His innocent question made me smile. I didn't always have cool stuff, Jack. And sometimes grown-ups don't see what others have to offer until it's right in front of them. The adults were slower to adjust, particularly my mother, who remained reserved in my presence. She came to the suite with others but rarely engaged directly with me, her discomfort evident in her tight smiles and minimal conversation. On the fifth evening of the retreat, I was surprised to find my father knocking on my door alone, long after most family members had returned to their houses for the night. "Do you have a minute?" he asked, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. I invited him in, offering him a seat in the comfortable seating area of the main room. Chef Anthony had left for the evening, and the suite was quiet except for the soft sound of waves from the lake below. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," my father began, turning his glass of scotch in his hands. "About what you said about belonging versus just being related." I nodded, but remained silent, giving him space to continue. "When you kids were growing up, I thought my job was to provide, to make sure you had food, shelter, education. I left the emotional stuff to your mother." He paused, looking out at the darkened lake. "I never really asked myself if you were happy, if you felt valued, especially once you became adults." It was perhaps the most self-reflective statement I'd ever heard from my father. "I can't change the past," he continued, "but I want you to know I'm proud of what you've accomplished, Donald. Not just this." He gestured around the suite. "But your career, the man you've become. And I'm sorry I haven't said that before now." His words touched something deep inside me, a longing for paternal approval I hadn't fully acknowledged. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot." We talked for over an hour, covering ground we'd never explored before. He asked about my work, showing genuine interest in understanding what I actually did as a software engineer. I shared stories about projects I'd led, challenges I'd overcome, successes I'd achieved, but never thought to mention at family gatherings. By the time he left, something had shifted between us. Not a complete transformation, but a step toward a more authentic relationship. As he reached the elevator, he turned back. "Your mother will come around," he said. "She needs time to process when things don't go according to her plan, but she loves you. We both do." The next morning brought another unexpected development. My oldest brother James invited me to join him for a hike, something we hadn't done together since we were teenagers. As we walked the scenic trail overlooking the lake, he opened up about his own struggles with family expectations. "You probably think I've had it easy being the oldest," he said as we paused to take in the view, "but there's been so much pressure to be perfect, to set the example. Sometimes I envy the freedom you've had to chart your own course." His confession surprised me. I'd always seen James as willingly embodying the role of golden child, never questioning the family hierarchy that benefited him. "I guess we've all been playing our assigned parts without realizing we could choose different ones," I replied. When we returned from the hike, we found preparations underway for a family dinner. Unlike previous years where meals were strictly organized by my mother with assigned seating and formal arrangements, this dinner had evolved organically, with different family members contributing dishes and helping with setup. Most surprisingly, it was being held on the expansive terrace of my suite, a location suggested not by me but by my siblings. Chef Anthony had happily agreed to collaborate with family members, incorporating traditional family recipes alongside his gourmet creations. As evening approached and family gathered on the terrace, I noticed my mother standing slightly apart, watching the scene with an unreadable expression. Making a decision, I approached her directly for the first time since our confrontation. "Would you like to see the kitchen?" I asked. "Chef Anthony incorporated your recipe for the garlic mashed potatoes. He said they're better than his original version." A small smile flickered across her face. "Did he really? Come see for yourself," I invited, leading her into the suite's kitchen where the chef was putting final touches on the meal. As Chef Anthony enthusiastically praised her recipe and asked for tips on her famous gravy technique, I saw my mother gradually relax, falling into her element as she offered suggestions and tasted samples. When we rejoined the gathering outside, the dynamic had subtly shifted once again. My mother took a seat beside me at the long table, something that would have been unthinkable at the beginning of the retreat. Dinner stretched for hours, conversations flowing naturally as family members shared stories, many featuring memories I'd never heard before or moments I'd forgotten. For once, I wasn't an afterthought but an active participant. My own stories met with interest and laughter. As dessert was being served, my mother touched my arm gently. "Could we talk privately for a moment?" she asked quietly. We walked to a secluded corner of the terrace, the voices of family creating a backdrop to our conversation. "I owe you an apology," she began, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "What I did was wrong, not just the excuse about space, but the years of not seeing you fully." I waited, sensing she had more to say. "I've always had this picture in my head of what our family should look like," she continued. "The successful children with their perfect spouses and children. And when reality didn't match my vision, I tried to reshape it instead of appreciating what was actually there." She paused, meeting my eyes directly. "Who was actually there? You." Her words weren't a complete resolution of our complex relationship, but they were an acknowledgement, a starting point for something new. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "I've spent a lot of time trying to earn a place in this family, trying to be seen, but I realize now that my worth isn't determined by anyone else's recognition of it." She nodded slowly. "You've shown us all that this week, in quite spectacular fashion." A hint of her usual wry humor surfaced in her smile. On the final morning of the retreat, as families packed and prepared for departure, there was one last gathering on my terrace. Someone, I suspected Rebecca, had arranged for a photographer to take a new family photo, one that prominently included me. As we assembled for the picture, I found myself not at the margins but in the center, surrounded by nieces and nephews who had appointed themselves my special assistants for the week. The photographer captured multiple shots, formal poses, silly faces, candid moments of genuine connection. When the time came to check out, I felt a curious mix of emotions. The retreat had been transformative in ways I hadn't expected. What began as a gesture of defiance had evolved into an opportunity for genuine change. Not perfect or complete transformation, but the beginning of new patterns, new possibilities for connection. 6 months later, the effects of that week at Lake Tahoe continue to ripple through our family. Communication has shifted, with more direct engagement and fewer assumptions. My siblings call more often, with conversations extending beyond surface pleasantries. My parents have visited me in Boston twice, making genuine efforts to understand my life here. Plans for next year's retreat are already underway, with a new approach to accommodations that ensures everyone feels equally valued and included. My father called specifically to confirm I'd be joining them months ahead of the actual date. The most significant change, however, is within me. I no longer measure my worth by my family's approval or inclusion. Standing up for myself changed not just how they saw me, but how I saw myself. I discovered strength I didn't know I possessed and boundaries I should have established long ago. Looking back, I realized that sometimes in life, when others won't make room for you, the answer isn't to make yourself smaller or beg for space. Sometimes, the answer is to create your own space so magnificent they can't help but notice what they've been missing. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself in a family situation? What did you do, and how did it change things? Let me know in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more stories about finding your place in the world, even when others try to define it for you. Share this with someone who might need encouragement to take up the space they deserve. Thanks for listening, and remember, your worth isn't determined by anyone else's recognition of it.